Hello everyone, welcome back to the Great Dumbarton Bake Off. My name is Mary Lesher, I'm the Programs Manager at Dumbarton House, and today I am making a pumpkin pie in honor of Thanksgiving. I know many of us learned about Thanksgiving in elementary school by participating in Thanksgiving pageants, but today I would like to take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the context and history of the Thanksgiving holiday. Before I get started today, I want to give a little bit of context for why I'm talking about Thanksgiving. Dumbarton House, the people who lived there, were obviously not a part of the first Thanksgiving in 1621, but the house sits on Anacostan and Piscataway Native American land holdings. So although Dumbarton House came along in 1799, this land and its history is much longer. We want to acknowledge that and make sure we talk about the history of our country and Native Americans in the context of this holiday. I'm going to be using a recipe from the Williamsburg Art of Cookery for pumpkin pie with a Y, of course. And to start, I'm going to get my pumpkin mashed and steamed. Here we go. I decided to carve in the sink this time since last time it was so messy. Okay, you guys are lucky that I only have one set of hands and I couldn't record while I was carving the pumpkin because I do not like pumpkin guts and I am not quiet about how gross I think they are. So, luckily you didn't have to see that, but now we have a beautiful carved pumpkin. I'm going to chop him up. I'm going to take the skin off this time because that was the part that I could not get into a good consistency for the pumpkin fritters. And you always kind of got like a little bite of pumpkin skin and it wasn't great. So I'm gonna take the skin off this time and then I'm going to boil the chunks of pumpkin and then we will be good to go for our pumpkin mash. Okie dokie. Now that we have our pumpkin on to boil, let's talk about Thanksgiving. So all cultures around the world have ways of giving thanks, and the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and the Wampanoag people were no different. The Wampanoag people, the native inhabitants of the area the Pilgrims and Puritans first came to, gave thanks through their own sets of rituals to thank nature and their creator for providing bounty through the land. The Pilgrims had a tradition of having festivals and feasts in honor of a good harvest or a battle victory. And the Puritans usually gave thanks because Thanksgiving was one of the only religious sanctioned holidays. And so a day of Thanksgiving would be spent fasting and praying and being thankful for all the bounties that you had. So in 1621, when all these groups are coming together, all of them have their own ways of giving thanks. Okay, here we go. So in the traditional Thanksgiving that most of us learn, the Pilgrims come to America seeking religious tolerance. They come to this new world where there's nothing there yet. They are discovering it for the first time and it's just theirs for the taking. And they show up and then they are surprised that there are Native Americans there and they're not really sure what to do about that. But then as they get settled in, they realize it's kind of hard to survive here and we need some help. And so Pilgrims work with the Wampanoags to survive those first couple of tough seasons. And then in 1621, they finally have a good year with a bountiful harvest. And to celebrate all of that, they get together, they have a rip-roaring good feast, they have a great time, and they party it up, and then they go their separate ways. The Pilgrims go on to found America, and the Native Americans, we just never really hear about them again. They just magically disappear. You might hear about those Native Americans again at some point in the future, maybe in your history class, talk about King Philip's War or in the context of the Revolution. But for the most part, our next substantive discussion of Native Americans in American history classes is in Manifest Destiny. It's the Trail of Tears. It's hundreds of years down the road, long after the first Thanksgiving. And those are kind of the bookends of Native American history that we are taught. We first meet them, we talk with them, we eat with them, they kind of go away, and then the next thing we know, they're gone. And this land belongs to the Americans, and they don't have any problems settling on that land anymore. But if we think critically, we know that Native Americans existed throughout all that time, throughout all those developments up to the current day. So if we think about the first Thanksgiving, this is the Wampanoag people. The Wampanoag people lived on the land the Pilgrims settled in for hundreds, thousands of years before the Pilgrims arrived. They had their own sets of roads. They had their own seasonal villages. They had their own technology for catching food and using the bounty of the land to support their families. They knew what they were doing here. And they existed through all of these developments, through the Pilgrims, through the Revolutionary War, through all of that. They were key players. They were also participating in the creation of this country. And they still exist to this day. Wampanoag people still live on their ancestral lands. They're still participating in our conversations about our past and about Thanksgiving and about what it means in the context of our country's history. Okay, our pumpkin is done, so I'm going to mash this up, and then we're going to talk about why we learn this particular version of Thanksgiving and not a larger history that incorporates all the players up to the present day. Okay, so now let's talk about why we celebrate a certain version of Thanksgiving. So after the first Thanksgiving, Thanksgivings become largely small and regional. Like I said before, individual groups had their own Thanksgiving rituals and would come together to give thanks when they felt it was necessary. We don't have a formalized Thanksgiving until 1777, when Continental Congress declares a day of Thanksgiving. And then it's celebrated sporadically, encouraged by presidents under the early new nation, but it doesn't become really a thing until the mid-1800s, when a woman named Sarah Josepha Hale petitions President Lincoln to make it an official holiday, mostly in response to the Civil War. They need some unity, they need some joy, they need something to bring the people together. And so Lincoln declares Thanksgiving a national holiday, and we've been celebrating it ever since. So because this holiday was about creating unity during the Civil War, a time of great unrest and chaos and difficulty, we didn't want it to be a complicated narrative. We wanted something that would bring people together, not something that would make it more difficult to believe in the American experiment. So rather than tell the full story and all the sides and give a huge comprehensive idea of what Thanksgiving meant and everyone who was involved, we narrowed it down a little bit. We made it easier to little bite-sized pieces so we could be patriotic and feel good about our country and its history. And that's why we learn a certain version of Thanksgiving. There are lots of other factors, but that's a big part of it. And it's important to remember while we are celebrating this holiday that this is not the only way to think about it and the only way to remember it. Okay, I may have underestimated the size of bowl I would need for this, but we're gonna do our best to mix this all together, and then we are going to bake some pies. Okay, I gave up and I got a bigger bowl. Okay, they're in. They're quite soupy. I do not have faith, but let's see how it goes. I'm still not sure how the consistency of the pies will turn out, but I will say it smells like heaven in here. It is fall scented heaven. up in the household right now. Another good thing is that we have leftover pumpkin. And the baker's assistant loves pumpkin. I'm sorry I woke you up. Baker's assistant, you go back to sleep. Go girl. Okay, I had to start after I took him out because I needed both my hands to get him out. Let's see how it tastes. As I said when I first started baking him, I wasn't sold on the consistency. And I think that has validated itself. It's very soupy, but let's see how it tastes. Tastes delicious. It is still a little bit warm, so maybe that's why he's kind of soupy still, but I was really worried about the pumpkin not being fully mashed and kind of stringy still, but you can't really tell. And it's still super good and delicious. So that's the important thing. All around, very good. Okay, so final confessional on our beautiful pumpkin pie. It was very good. It doesn't taste like modern pumpkin pie. It's not as sweet, has kind of a little bit of a weird texture, but it is really nice and really refreshing and will be delicious with my Thanksgiving meal tomorrow. We talked a lot about the history of Thanksgiving today, and I want to say that just because Thanksgiving has a complicated history doesn't mean that we shouldn't celebrate it. Like I mentioned in the beginning, every culture has a way of giving thanks, and so we should continue to do that and be grateful for our country and the rights and freedoms that it allows us, and be grateful for the ability to spend time with our family, even if it's in a virtual format this year or a socially distanced format. But we should also be grateful for the opportunity to look critically at our history and see maybe what didn't go right the first time and try and change it. And that's really powerful, and I think a beautiful, hopeful thing about our country and its path forward. So thank you, one and all, for watching the Great Dumbarton Bake Off. I want to say a personal thank you to each and every one of you. It's been a wonderful experience for me to share all of these recipes with you and to share some history along the way. And I very much so appreciate your support and your comments and your attempts at the recipes as well. It really makes my day. I have a wonderful job, and I'm so grateful that I get to share it with all of you. So have a very happy, safe, and healthy Thanksgiving. And I will see you in December. Bye-bye.